In this exercise, we're going to be creating a custom background screen for the main start screen of your game. In doing this, when you download the custom background folder, we're going to use one of these three images that I've provided for you. Just know that you'll also need to create a custom background screen for the actual gameplay that we're going to be creating, and that will be part of your project grade. In this exercise, we're mainly going to focus on the main screen of the game. To get started, let's jump into Illustrator and create a new file. As with the other ones in this project, we're going to be working in a screen graphics, so choose mobile as your preset. The size for this one is going to be 600 pixels wide and 400 pixels tall. Do make sure you have pixels as your unit of measure. We won't need any bleed settings, but under the advanced options, make sure your raster effects is set to high 300 ppi. With that, when we say create, this will be the perfect proportions for your main start screen. Do make sure that it's perfectly set like this, because when you export your artwork, we want it to fit well inside of your screen. Now to get started, we want to place one of those images from our custom background folder into our workspace. You can choose any one of the images that we have. We've got a treescape, you've got a little seascape, and also some clouds in the cloudscape. I'm going to choose the seascape image and place it into my work area. If it's larger than your work area, you may scale it down, but later on we're going to go back and resize it so that it fits the overall area. So it's actually okay if it's larger than necessary. With your image still selected, go up to Object and choose Create Gradient Mesh. This is going to make a mesh on top of your image, and wherever the lines of rows and columns intersect, it's going to look for that color and assign that color into that area. Now the best part about a gradient mesh is that you can go back in and change this up. Let's give it a certain number of detail. The more rows and columns you have will give you much more detail. So as you see, if I increase this, you can start to see what that will look like. The fewer columns you have, the more abstract it'll look, and it'll actually be a little bit easier to work with. So choose an appropriate number of rows and columns. I'm going to suggest between 5 and 10 for each. And once you're finished, you can say OK, and this is the results that we get. The next thing we want to do is to be able to push this around so it looks like it has a nice swirling, almost cosmic effect. To do this, the tool we're going to choose is the Warp tool. The Warp tool is nested underneath the Width tool, and it's part of a variety of different tools that you can use to move things around. With the Warp tool selected, it acts kind of like a brush. If you double click on the tool options, you can change the size of it, both the width and the height, and also the amount of detail and simplicity. I'm going to keep my detail relatively low and the simplicity towards the center. And in order to change the size of it, I'm going to hit cancel for now. You can hold down the Option key. You can see a little corner piece will appear on your cursor, and then when you click and drag off to the side, you can readjust the size and shape of your tool based on that by clicking and dragging, usually at the diagonal. Now with the object selected, I can click and drag around and be able to move and push and warp my cosmic background until I get kind of some fun shapes that I want to work in. Do be careful that if you go off to the edge, you can see it will warp the edge pieces, and I want this to still remain larger than my overall work area. But just take a moment and push this around until you get some results that you like. If you want to preview what it looks like, I held down the Command key and deselect it, and this is the results that I get. The next thing we want to do is to be able to change the color of what we have on top of this. So I want to choose my selection tool and lock down my artwork. Select it, go up to Object, and then lock the selection. This way it won't move. Now we can grab our rectangle tool and let's create a rectangle that's on top of the entire background area. We'll set the fill color to be a gradient. So let's open up our Swatches panel. I don't see my swatch. There it is right there. Within our swatches, remember, if we want to find more pre-made swatches, we can go to our swatch library and let's choose a simple gradient. The kind of gradient that I like to use will either be gems, metals, or neutrals. I'm going to open up gems and jewels because it's nice and it's got a variety of different colors. When I select these, you can see these are the pre-made or predefined settings. I can even open up my gradient tool and change up the kind of gradient it is, and then move around my sliders till I get something that I like. Maybe I want this one, instead of being lighter, I'll make it slightly darker for the central point. Also remember, you've got a gradient tool, and with the gradient tool you can click and drag and redefine or redistribute the starting and stopping point of your gradient. Once you got a gradient established the way you like, open up your transparency panel and change the blending mode for the transparency panel to something that will give you some results for the background. We want to be able to see the details, but we don't want it to be so overpowering that we can't read what's on top. So screen will usually make it lighter. Overlay gives you some pretty good results. Soft light or hard light will give you some different results. I'm liking the way hard light looks because it has everything nice and dark in the background, but still allows me to see all of the details for my colors. The final thing we need to do is to place all of this inside of a clipped area so that it fits the exact size that we want it. Let's return to our tools and choose the rectangle tool. I'm going to set my fill and stroke to be the default white and black. Click once, and we need to create a rectangle that's the size of our artboard, which will be 600 pixels wide and 400 pixels tall. When we say OK, we can move this into place exactly where we want it to be. Remember, since our artwork is larger than our working area, that gives us more room to work. Now I'm going to go to Object and unlock everything. When I select all, we'll go to Select All. I can go to Object and create the clipping mask. Clipping mask Make. This will create a mask inside of that rectangle that's on top, and then it's simply a matter of moving it till it fills up my entire artboard. Now that I've got an established swirling cosmic background, I can return to my Layers panel and lock down the background layer, and all of the other artwork will be created on top of this layer. The next thing we need to do for our background is to fill the night sky with a variety of different stars. In order to do this, we're going to be using our sprayer tool. The first thing we need to do, however, is to go to our Layers panel, and on top of the background create a new blank layer, and let's rename this layer the Stars layer. We can close that out. I'm going to shift my artwork over and work on the artboard off to the side for now. The tool that I want to use is going to be the Star tool, and that's usually located underneath or nested with your rectangle tool. With that tool selected, I'm also going to change up my fill color to be yellow. Later on you can change the color of the stars if necessary. Now with the Star tool, when you click and drag, by default you'll get a star that looks something like this, and that's your stereotypical looking star. Some other things you can do with the Star tool when you click and drag is press your up or down arrow to add or remove a number of points to it. So you may want to give yourself a star that looks like this. Another thing you can do is when you click and drag, hold down your Command key, and when you drag out, you can change the pointiness of each of the individual points. And so as you do that, you can also add some more spikes to that. I'm going to choose my Move tool and let it be a little bit smaller so that they're all relatively the same size. A final way of making a star is I'm going to make a copy of my typical star, and let's apply an effect to it. With the star selected, I'm going to go to Effect, choose Distort and Transform, and choose Pucker and Bloat. With Pucker and Bloat, this is going to take the existing points and move them around so that it looks like it's puckered together or bloated out. If you turn on Preview, pull it more towards the pucker side, and your star looks something closer to like this. Once you get something that you like, and say OK. Notice that our star still has that original outline of the traditional 5 points. This is because it's adding an effect on top of its vector outline. In order to commit to this transformation, With it selected, you can go to Object, and let's expand the appearance, and now you can see I've got all the vector points that it created from here. With this done, I'm going to select all of my stars and make them slightly smaller, and then place them off to the side here. The next thing we need to do is to save each of these stars as individual symbols. Returning to the side, I'm going to open my Symbols panel, and remember, if you don't see your symbols, you can always go up to Window and choose Symbols from there. To add a star to your Symbols panel, I'm going to drag it off so we can see it. Usually there's some default ones already added to here. Select a symbol and choose the New. You can give it a name, so I'm going to call this one Star 1. And as far as the options go, you can keep the export type as a movie clip, and you can keep it as a dynamic symbol. We're not going to really change anything, but when we say OK, you can see it's been added to the objects that we have. Do the same for all of your other stars. Select them, add them, give it a name, Star 2. Let's do one for Star 3. And then finally the fourth and final star. With all of those added, we can now use our sprayer tool to add a variety of different stars to our background. I'm going to keep my Symbols tool pulled off to the side, but open up my artwork so I can see it. The tool we want to use is located towards the bottom of your toolbox, and this is the Symbol Sprayer tool. Notice that there's some other symbol tools that are nested in with it, but to use those we need to start off with a symbol sprayer. With this symbol sprayer, choose whatever star shape that you want to start off with. I'm going to use my simple star number 4 as a starting point. And whenever you click and drag, it'll automatically randomly add them to your sprayed area. And so you can fill your night sky as much as you want, and you can see it'll push them out of the way as you add more on it. When you let go of your mouse, each of these symbols is going to be nested inside an overall area shape. And so if I was to choose my Move tool, or my Selection tool, they can all move together at the same time. Once I've got them all sprayed on here, let's see if we can add a little more randomness to our overall design. With them selected, the other symbol tools that you can do is to shift them around. So with the symbol shifter, I can click and drag and push them into different areas, have them fill in one area or outside of another. Or with my Symbol Scruncher tool, I can have them move closer together and have them on top of each other. With the Symbol Sizer tool, this one has a keyboard shortcut to it. By default, when I click on it, you can see I can make some of my stars larger, or if I hold down my Option key, I can make them smaller. It'll do the opposite kind of effect. The same thing happens with your Symbol Scruncher. By default, it pulls them together, but if I hold down my Option key, it will actually push them farther apart. So this may actually come in a little bit more handy. Some other symbol tools you can do is our Symbol Spinner tool. Now this won't really help us much for these stars, but if you had a symbol that you wanted to go in a different direction, you can spin it around. For these stars, you're not going to really see too much of a difference, although it may come in handy to have some randomness for that. The other thing you can do is a Symbol Stainer tool. With the Stainer tool, this will allow you to change the color that you have selected. Right now I've got them set to be yellow, but if I open up my Swatches panel and choose a different color, let's say I wanted some of them to be more of an orange kind of color. With just a couple of clicks, you can see it will add a little bit of an orange overlay to their color and design. If I chose a different kind of color like blue, I can have them shifted towards the blue. So now I've got a more randomness within their color scheme that they're using. The other kind of symbol thing you can do is a Symbol Screener tool. This will allow you to change the opacity of it. By default, it'll make them more opaque, but if you hold down the Option key, you can make them less opaque. So I'm going to go through and change up the look and feel of those. And the final one is the Symbol Styler tool. This will allow you to apply a specific style to them depending on the style that you have selected. Since I really don't want to do that, I'm not going to use this tool for now. The final thing to know is if you ever want to erase away some of the symbols that you've sprayed, choose your symbol sprayer tool one more time, and just like the other ones, if you hold down the Option key, you can click and it will erase away any of the things that you have. What we want to do is to fill this in with a variety of different stars and give ourselves some different looks to it. So I'm going to choose a different symbol, spray it in, and then go back and change up the look and feel of those. Move them around a little bit, change up the size of them until I get something that I like. Once you've got a design that you like, the final thing we'll need to do, I can close out my symbols, is to change up the blending mode so that it looks like it fits more naturally into your background. So let's go back to our transparency panel. Change your transparency by either changing the blending mode or dropping the opacity or any combination of both. In my case, let's see what screen looks like, or maybe even lighten. I kind of like the look and feel of that. With that done, let's return to our layers panel and let's lock down our stars layer and create a new layer on top of this and continue on. The final detail we want to add to our background layer is to create what I call some cosmic dust. And this is simply some more lines and textures that tie in all of our different shapes. So returning to our layers panel, let's rename layer 3 Cosmic Dust. We can close it out. And the tool we're going to use to create this will be our pencil tool. Remember, with the pencil tool, you can click and drag and it will follow around and create shapes based on what you've selected. If you double click the pencil tool and open up the options, we want to make sure our fidelity is set to very smooth. We want to fill the new strokes in with whatever fill color we have selected, and we want to close off the paths when they get close to each other. So make sure those two things are checked on. We'll say OK to this. For now, I've set my fill color to be this light yellow, although we can change this up later on as we see fit. To fill in and create this cosmic kind of dust, I simply want to draw off some stripe-like patterns on top of my design. You don't have to do a lot of them, just a few to start off with. And they don't have to fill up the entire board. Instead, I kind of want them to just snake around and be a little bit more free-form with how they look and what they look like. Later on, you can always go back and make edits and change this, but this will just get us a good starting point to work with. You can have some smaller and some larger, and you can have them go different directions if you want. I'll even fill in one right here. Once you got something that you like, in order to move these around, again, I'm going to choose my warp tool. I want to select all of them, Command A, and then I'm going to click and drag and push these around until it gives me a more wave-like effect. Now, we don't want to overdo this. We simply want them to kind of move in a more natural direction. Again, if you want to make your brush larger, you can hold down the Option key and then drag up and to the right. Some other effects you can do with your warp tool, instead of using the basic warp, is to choose the twirl tool. Now if you choose this one, let's double click the twirl tool and open their options. Make sure the height and width are relatively the same and the intensity is not too high. The higher the intensity, the faster it's going to twirl. So I'm going to set my intensity down to about 30. Also, the twirl rate will determine how fast it goes, but also the direction. Right now my twirl rate is set to -43. So when I click on it now, you can see how quickly it turns and it goes in a clockwise fashion. However, I'll open up my options again. If I set my twirl rate to something in the positive realm, and this time I'm going to do positive 20, you can see it'll go in a counterclockwise kind of fashion. Playing around with the twirl that you have will give it a little bit more interesting effect. However, if you click and drag too much, it'll swirl it up a little bit too much, and that may not be the effect that you're wanting to go for. So clicking on this, adjusting the twirl rate to be either positive or negative will get it to twirl in some different kind of fashions. The other thing I do is I always click and drag, and that will allow it to move as it twirls. Once you get something that you like, the last thing that we need to do is to change up our blending mode and maybe even our color scheme that we have. So I'm going to open up my transparency one more time, and let's play around with the different blending modes, seeing what results that we get. Again, if it's too much, you can either change up the opacity of it or find a blending mode that better suits the overall design that you have. Alright, I'm kind of liking the look and feel of this. The very last thing we need to do is to make sure everything still fits within that 600 by 400 pixel area frame. So again, I'm going to go to my Layers panel. This time I'm going to unlock all of my layers and create one more rectangular frame. Again, I'm going to set my default fill and stroke, click once, make sure the size of it is 600 by 400 and say OK. When we place it directly over our area, this should fill up the entire screen. Now when I go to select all, this will get everything that's on all of the layers, and we can go to Object and create the clipping mask. Now everything fits nicely inside of that overall area, and it's the correct size that we need it to be. We can return to our Layers panel, and let's get rid of any unnecessary layers. So I'm going to choose my background and my star and delete it away. And now I've got my cosmic dust background ready to go and use for my game. Once we're finished, we need to save this document. Later on, we're going to do another exercise that adds text and also a planet and a spaceship on top of this. So we're not going to turn this in just yet. Instead, let's go to File and down to Save As, if we haven't done this already. And I'm going to call this one, make sure we're saving it also into our custom background, the custom background, and make sure to add your name to it as well. For now, we're also going to keep this as an Illustrator file and hit Save and say OK to the Illustrator options. Again, we're not going to turn this in just yet. We're going to incorporate this into the next exercise.